Hello, welcome again to FairTax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are
the FairTax guys. As you can tell right there.
Coming to you from Big Daddy Studios in Gainesville, Florida on Facebook. They are the streaming. This is actually our pre-recorded show, but as it streams live on Facebook on Wednesday, the 17th.
17th, yep.
The comments will be live. We'll be here talking to anybody that wants to leave us a comment. So the recording is here, but we'll be talking live on the comments on Facebook as well.
Yep.
We urge people to check out excluded.tv, not EX, just plain XCLUDED, excluded.tv. So named because a lot of the content there is what the big social media folks don't want you to see. And this is an alternative outlet so you can see things that get censored on the big social media platforms. Very modest $30 a year subscription fee for that. We would certainly hope that you would take advantage thereof.
And you can get the Excluded app for your iPhone, for your Android, for your Apple TV, for your Roku, for the other digital TVs. You can get it everywhere, okay? And you can be at home watching it on your big screen TV. It's pretty cool.
And again, we invite you to leave us an email at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com or a comment on our Facebook page as well, the FairTax Guys Facebook page as well. We'll check that out. And as you can see from the video image behind us, we still have Kerry Bowers with us. Thank you for hanging with us here, bud.
Yeah.
We got
to be with you.
Ron has something really cool he really wants to dig in with you about.
Because we can branch out in so many different directions with this. You've probably all heard about the New York Times hit piece on the president. Trump engaged in suspect tax schemes as he reaped riches from his father. First, he got money from his father?
Wow.
Oh, my God. That's almost un-American.
That's never happened before, has it?
And suspect to who? Who finds this suspicious? Because
the New York Times reporters.
If I remember correctly, his dad died about 20 years ago, okay? So the IRS has had 20 years to look into this. And believe me, if there was something going on there, the IRS would have found it. So, I mean, there's just a lot here. Kerry? Mr. Bowers is with us again, all right? Again, Kerry is an Air Force veteran. He was a combat pilot. He's a FairTax expert, I mean, really knowledgeable expert. He actually ran for president at one time, and he had some interesting comments to say about that, which I never realized that there. What did you say, Kerry? There were over 1,300 candidates for president in 2016?
That's correct. That's federally registered with the Federal Election Commission candidates, and that's of all parties and non-party affiliated. But, of course, our media, as the president likes to say, fake news, and it was fake news. There was never just 17 Republican candidates. There were almost 300, and there were almost 300. Actually, it was over 300 in the case of Republicans and almost 300 Democrats, and I think they were generally reporting around 5. The media, unfortunately, likes to censor the unpublicized candidates, and they do so for their agenda. And it's one that meets their needs and not the needs of the American people. So there are literally hundreds of us that go unpublicized, even though we have very active campaigns. We're participating in various radio shows. I was even in a parade in Florida, of all things. And I spoke with audiences all the way from Florida to Washington State. And I spoke to 10% of the Republican districts that we have of the 90, I think it's close to 90 in Iowa, if my memory serves me correct. We spoke to 10% of those during the course of our campaign, too. So we were highly visible. We were featured in the Las Vegas newspaper out here, the Las Vegas Sun, also in a Sunday edition of that, 2 years before the election. But yet the media chooses who they want to present for their own reasons and ignoring others. And I have a lot more on that coming out in the future.
Who'd have thunk a dishonest media? Good. Wonder if Bugs Bunny was one of those candidates somewhere along. Go ahead and continue with what you were doing there, Ron.
Yeah, talking about the dishonest media. I mean, you know, the New York Times is known not to be a real fan of the president right now. And so they think, people have been talking about this for over a year. Well, the president ought to make his tax returns public. Why? I think the people who are claiming that somebody else should make their tax returns public should show a good example by first making their tax returns public. What do you think of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, my personal opinion is that taxes are between you and the government, and it's no one else's business. If it is someone else's business, and we have representatives in Congress as well as on the judiciary that should be handling those specific issues, and within the IRS. One of the things I think is really important about the FairTax is that they're very specific within the legislation exactly who may have access to your records. And your records would be specifically those businesses that are collecting the taxes and then reporting and remitting taxes back to the government.
Yeah,
so they're very specific about that. Not only that, but they'll also describe in the bill what the penalties are for violations of various parts of the new tax code under the Fair Tax, which can include both civil and criminal penalty.
Yeah, but when you're talking about your records, you're talking about corporate records. No individual information is compiled and collected during the Fair Tax.
That's exactly right. So today you're fearing the possibility of an audit in the future, or like the president, he's got the New York Times and other opposing groups out there that are trying to get access to his tax records. Well, under the Fair Tax, you as an individual won't have any tax records to access.
Yeah, how can you release something that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
So, there's another headline or sub-headline here. 11 takeaways from the Times investigation into the Trump's wealth. Oh, based on a trove of confidential financial records. I'm not going any farther.
Keyword confidential.
Yeah. If they're confidential, why does the Times have them? I mean,
exactly. That's a very good point right there. And and this is one of those things where I think that the freedom of the press steps beyond its bounds when they start releasing confidential information on individuals as well as confidential information that may be specific to classified information that only the government should have access to.
That's right.
And I think there should be some penalty for that.
Yeah.
But certainly they should not be releasing confidential information. Otherwise, it's not confidential information, period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you were in the service. Bob and I were in the service. Confidential meant something. I was actually cleared for secret while I was in the service. And you didn't want to violate that stuff. That's not a good thing to do.
Yeah, if you mishandle it, if your last name's not Clinton, you get in a lot of trouble for doing that.
That's in fact true.
Oh, and I've got to become Clinton. I was not in the service, Ron. I certainly highly respect those guys, but I was never there. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were. Anyways.
Well, my eyesight wasn't good enough for flight training, and that's what I wanted to do. So if you're not going to teach me to fly an airplane, I'm going to stay home.
Yeah, I actually, this is digressing a little bit. I really wanted to be a Navy pilot because I have two brothers that are Navy pilots, but my glasses wouldn't let me. So I ended up on the surface Navy on a minesweeper in Vietnam. So
how do we get off into those weeds?
Anyways, the thing is, this episode between the New York Times and the Trump brings out a lot of the problems with the current system. All right, the income tax should not be used. You shouldn't have a tax system that can be used as a weapon against people, and that's exactly what's happening, isn't it, Kerry?
Yes, it is. And many times what you'll find is that perhaps a law enforcement agency, particularly a federal agency, if they're trying to get someone in one direction for one crime, what they can do is go to family members and associates. And they can use the IRS as an intimidation means to intimidate them into providing information not about this other individual's, the suspect's tax business, but whatever other dealings that may be considered illegal. So they will intimidate friends and family and associates into providing information using the tax laws. So there you have that intimidation factor. And let's not forget, too, that I think something that we often overlook is the Fourth Amendment violation that we have and when we're talking about income taxes, because what we find under income taxes is kind of like what Judge Kavanaugh just went through. You are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. The IRS, if they have any suspicion whatsoever that you may be in possession of funds that they think, without really substantial proof, but they think you should not have in your possession, they can seize that, freeze up your bank accounts, and now it becomes your responsibility to be able to put together a case and provide the information that will get those freed up. So you, in fact, are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent and at great cost. The FairTax, of course, eliminates that for us as individuals, since we won't have those types of records and filings and those sort of things to keep up with. And we're going to find, too, that they have bills of rights that they have put into, a bill of rights that they have put into the FairTax legislation that certainly makes it a lot fairer. It puts more of the onus on the government to be able to produce the facts that you have done wrong, and they have limits on then what can be seized and not be seized.
That sounds like the original Bill of Rights, doesn't it?
Yeah, which the IRS routinely violates. I mean,
yeah, and the reason they violate it is because Congress has allowed them to. All right, Congress has given them the authority to throw the Bill of Rights out the window. All right, with the current income tax system, this is the founders of the country and the framers of the Constitution would be appalled at this system. I mean, if Thomas Jefferson came back right now, what do you think he'd say about the income tax?
Yeah, I think we've heard his comments about that. If you want to go back into the archives of FairTax Power Radio and find our conversation with Thomas Jefferson, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I'm a very adamant reader and studier of the Federalist Papers by Hamilton, Madison, and Jay. Of course, they published it under the title of Publius as far as the author goes. But you will not find any mention of income taxes anywhere in those 85 papers. And in fact, it is just full of nothing but the focus on either taxes on property, which they consider to be a direct tax, taxes in terms of a capitation tax, which means a head tax, if you will, by individual. And then really the focus is on consumption, allowing an individual to set their own level of taxation based upon their manner of consumption.
Yeah. That sounds awfully simple.
Oh, all right.
You know, one of the things I like to kind of go back to, Ron, I'm not sure if you were heading this direction, but we've got the New York Times that's talking about these infractions that they've discovered in these probably thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of tax returns put out by the various parts of the Trump organization. Well, I want to know what makes them think they're right about who figured out whether they were doing wrong or not.
Good point.
What we find, if you were to do my taxes and if Bob was to do my taxes and I did my taxes, I bet we'd come up with 3 different answers. And it's an unfortunate situation where that's often true. Money Magazine back in 1987 started and would do 8 of these over a 10-year period. Up until 1997, where they would produce an example tax problem.
Yeah,
and that tax problem, I'm sorry?
Create a hypothetical family and ask them what this family owes.
Family, and they give them a fairly reasonable, a few, they probably own a property. They had a property they were renting out. They had some bonds and stocks and that sort of thing. Not overly complicated, but yet one that still put in some tasking on the part of the researcher to be able to figure out, the tax preparer to figure out how to do it. And the Money Magazine then divided in, they created a group, an example group of 50 individuals, and I think that they asked, and up to, I think it was generally 40 plus that would respond, and they were divided into 4 categories. That was a major national accounting firm, regional accounting firms, then firms like H&R Block, and then we had the independent agent who is licensed to be able to do this and has to take certain tests to certify for that. And each year they had the same problem given to these folks. Now, what was interesting about that was the disparity that we had in the results. And interestingly enough, it always came back in terms of what Money Magazine had determined to be the best answer. Notice I didn't say the exact answer, the correct answer.
Your best guess at what it really is.
They came up with, the one that was consistent with their answer over the 10 years was H&R Block. And they figured that was because H&R Block, if you have a problem when you go in to see them, and that agent there couldn't help you, he had a phone service that he could go to back at the headquarters, so to speak, that they could call. They got more experts in on this so that they could come up with a better solution.
Because you need a lot of experts when it comes to dealing with this current tax code.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think you have a graph there we could put up, and maybe we can show just how bad this can be for people when you're talking about tax preparers.
Yeah, pop that up, Gabe.
And one of the things I want to point out, too, is that...
Oh, my God.
We're laughing, but this is a serious matter, guys.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, if he could just show that up one more time.
Yeah, I tell you, if I figure out my taxes and I owe $68.07 and the IRS thinks I owe $73,247, I would think that there should be a fair, impartial arbiter to determine who's right. But under the income tax, guess who determines who's right? The person who thinks you're wrong to start with.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that picture?
And one of the reasons for the complication is that Congress is constantly trying to change the tax code. Now, we both have Congress.gov up on our computers,
yes.
All right? And as of right now, again, we'll say this again. Go to Congress.gov and in the search bar, put in quotes, Internal Revenue Code, because most of these tax bills start with to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. So if you put in quotes, Internal Revenue Code, you come up with all these bills. I've got 1,617
correct
attempts to change the tax code. Now, not all of these will become law, but some of them will. And this is just for this Congress. This is just for the last 20 months? Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. And so this is one of the reasons the tax code is so complicated. You have a favorite one of yours, Bob?
Well, I'm looking at the one Kerry, we've talked a lot about how the tax code is used to try to influence behavior, social engineering. You know, if the government wants you to do something, they'll give you a tax incentive. If they want you not to, they'll give you a tax penalty. This one coming out, this new S3559, it was introduced on the 6th. That was 4 days ago. As we're recording this, it says a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to terminate the credit for new qualified plug-in electric drive motor vehicles and to provide for a federal highway user fee on alternative fuel vehicles. Why is that in the tax code?
That's crazy.
Just imagine trying to keep up with 400.
Yeah, that's more than one per day that actually make it into law. Oh, and I don't know if you heard me. I grew up in Winston-Salem, right next to High Point.
Oh, yeah. I did not hear that. Great. We may have some kid folk we don't know about.
Could have. In fact, we bought a car from a dealer in High Point one time.
We're getting off the subject a little bit.
Now we're really off in the weeds, aren't we?
But that's all right. We're having a great conversation. Yeah, so anyways, getting back, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to spin off of this. I got another report. One of our FairTax supporters sent me this, and Trump's personal finances and the death tax. Now, this is an article by Kelly. They don't give a last name, and I don't know if it's a man or a woman, from selfreliantcentral.com. And this person hates the death tax, okay, the estate tax, and that is the thrust of their writing on this. But they put in a lot of the New York Times. The president received at least $413 million in today's dollars from his father's estate empire, much of it through tax dodges through the 1990s. Well, what's a tax dodge? It's exactly what we're talking about by all these proposals that Congress makes and passes and the president signs, and it becomes law. And it becomes a tax dodge. They call it a tax dodge, but it is a legal way to reduce your tax liability, okay? And it is absolutely legal. And it just happens to hit, people in Congress that are wealthy, and they end up with a number of ways to legally reduce their tax dodge, because you can look it up very quickly and very easily to find out that 1/2 of the people in Congress are millionaires. 1/2. That's not representative of the rest of us.
I'm surprised it's that low. I thought it'd be more than that.
It is slightly over.
Peter Schweitzer points out in some of his books about how certain members of Congress may come in either in debt, or they may have maybe a few tens of thousands of dollars to their name.
Yeah.
But in a very short time, we're talking about them having considerable sums of money.
Yeah.
And most of that, of course, is made possible through the tax mechanisms that Congress continues to offer.
I think there's a lady named Pelosi that applies to. For what that's worth.
Yeah, so, and they go on to talk about the sham. They set up a sham corporation. Somehow the term Clinton Foundation comes to mind. Anyways.
One of the things I think is very important is that word wealthy is thrown around an awful lot. And I'm not a wealthy man by any means, and I don't even know where is the fine line between you're healthy, okay, economically, or you're wealthy.
Yeah.
But unless an individual is actually using their wealth for some means that's destructive to the people in some way, or using it in some mean manner, well, let's think about what people of wealth are doing with their money. They have it invested, and when money's invested in savings or investments, it becomes opportunities, if it's in a bank, for an individual to go and borrow that money, and it means it's a larger supply, so you get it at a reduced interest rate, so that now you can go and start your own business, or build your home, or buy your car, or whatever it may be. The other thing that they may be doing with that is investing it or growing capital so that they can start their own businesses, which in turn means that they are going to be able to provide jobs so that people are able to get that upward social mobility. So unless a wealthy person is taking all their money and sticking it under their mattress and then using that wealth for some dastardly means, then it's being used for good. But we never seem to point that out, that, and like I say, unless you're hiding that money somewhere and you've actually got it back into the mainstream of our economy, then it's doing some good for someone, in fact, probably thousands of people.
And people, because we've had the income tax for over 100 years, and it's all people know. So every once in a while, and I'll be explaining the fair tax for the first time to somebody, and and I've had several people say, well, what if they earn $1 million a year, but they only spend like $100,000? Then how do we tax the rest of that? First off, it's none of your darn business, what a person earns and what they spend. You got to get out of this frame of mind where you're so concerned. I've said this before. The income tax has caused us to become a nation of people who are obsessed with what other people earn. Mind your own darn business, okay? If a person earns $1 million a year and only spends $100,000, like you say, Kerry, what are they going to do with the rest of that? They're not going to put it under their mattress. They're going to invest it and save it. They're going to earn interest on it, okay? And then, like you say, that money's going to be available for other startups, to get going. And those businesses create jobs. That's a good thing.
Absolutely is. And those are the things that, we really don't put into perspective, because we're always hearing wealthy people being put down by the liberal side of our society these days. And they really don't weigh in what are the good impacts of people that have wealth. Look at Bill Gates. They're giving away their money, giving away the better part of their fortune. And there's a lot of philanthropists out there in our nation today that are doing the same thing. And in fact, you're going to find that we have a lot of folks that are doing far better with social programs from a private level than we'll find the government is doing with social programs from a government perspective. And it's a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, and getting to the people that it really needs to go to. So, this whole thing of hitting people for wealth is just not right. And it's one of the things I like about the fair tax. If you're wealthy, you want to buy a $10 million home, great. Go ahead and pay the 23% interest that's embedded in that $10 million. If you can only afford a $100,000 home, then great. You're going to pay, whatever the percentage is in there, 23% in that as well. So the nice thing about the fair tax is that when we look in terms of wealth, I think we're thinking in terms of, well, what do they have that I don't have? Well, if it's something they have and they're wealthy, they paid the tax for it. And that's what I think makes it a lot better, fairer system. And I'd like to think in terms of equitable, too. Not just fair, but what is equitable. And the fair tax is one where everybody pays the same rate. Yeah. Everybody gets the same benefit based on family size out of the rebate, and every person and every business has the benefit of the tax credits that we have in terms of eliminating the embedded taxes in products and services so that they can be produce cheaper and we can buy those products cheaper and just have that tax added at the end. So all in all, it is a fair system. It is an equitable system.
Yeah, you mentioned in the last week's program there's a lot about the fair tax that the Democrats ought to like, but they're not on it simply because it's thought of anyway as a Republican idea. And I mean, how do we market this to them?
Well, yeah, really the only way we can market it is that we've got to have the groundswell of people that will contact their representatives. I think it would be very important, too, if we could get more businesses involved. You know, when we saw the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and we're seeing the same thing now for Tax Reform 2.0, the Republicans grabbed this and they put out a huge propaganda campaign. We have the president talking about it when we see him with his cabinet meetings. We have Kevin Brady on every possible financial show, Fox Business, CNN, you name it. They're out there, they're propagandizing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And they're saying, you know, we brought these businessmen in and they loved it. Well, yeah, you can bring those businessmen in and say, hey, we're going to cut your tax rate on your corporate level from 39% down to 20%. Do you think that's great? They're going to go, yeah, that's great. But what they don't tell them is, but do you think it would be better we gave you 0%?
Yeah.
In other words, that option is never presented in these meetings. That's the propaganda that, but we only hear the propaganda that they loved it. Well, yeah, they love it. Any reduction, reduce it 1%, I'm going to take that over nothing at all. But they're never given the other option, and it's never advocated. And I'm really sorry to see, too, that a lot of our sponsors and actually our co-sponsors don't support it. Let's look at Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, back in March of 2016, before the election, signed on as a co-sponsor of S18, or whatever it was back in 16. He signed on as a co-sponsor. The very next week, he's on Morning Joe on MSNBC touting a flat income tax. Now, that's speaking out of both sides of your mouth. So why do gals even sign up, senators, congressmen, I shouldn't say guys and gals. Why do they even sign up for this? Well, because it doesn't hurt to sign up for it. Unless you're DeSantis in Florida now, and they try to throw it back in your face that, you know, you're all for this additional tax on top of income taxes.
Yeah. We're going to fix the folks to do that, though.
Well, absolutely. So they'll sign up for it just in case somebody starts moving it so they can say, hey, I was on board with that well before we started talking about it. But the fact is that, again, every one of our sponsors and co-sponsors are Republicans. Republicans have been too timid to really initiate anything. I like to always say that the last time that the Republicans implemented a single lasting program of strong constitutional merit and economic principle was the interstate highway system under the Eisenhower administration, who was the last Republican president to have 3 balanced budgets. Now, that shows us how long we have had a Republican Party that really, in my opinion, has been timid, has been impotent, and really getting serious things done for this nation. Instead, they tend to want to massage. They'll talk to it, but we don't say anything about it. And we've all probably seen the pictures of Vice President Pence talking about the fair tax and how bad the income tax is. Well, where was the vice president when we started talking the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? Where was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who was a co-sponsor of the fair tax? Where was my good friend Matt Gaetz, that we see on television all the time now on Fox News out of Florida, who I used to share a microphone with in Florida, talking about the fair tax occasionally? Where were they at? It only took one member of Congress to stand up and say, wait a minute. What you're doing is perpetuating upon the American people what you've been perpetuating for 105 years. I say no. I want to stand here on this floor today. I want the media in here, and I'm going to tell them what you, the Congress, put in your own Better Way plan about a consumption-based tax and how superior it is to an income-based tax. And I'm going to stand here and advocate only for the fair tax, and I will be the block. And that's how you start getting publicity. One strong congressman standing up saying, this will not pass because I don't believe it's right, and here's something's better, and then start introducing that to the people.
Well, hopefully that works. And I've noticed we're a bit over time here already. I do appreciate you joining us, Mr. Bowers, and hopefully we can talk to you again sometime in the future.
Look forward to it.
All righty. Well,
Thanks, Kerry.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Walero.
The Fair Tax guys reminding you that the fair tax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Oh, these income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. Who are you?
We're the FairTax guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FairTax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Yeah.